Where is he? Where is he? Me?
Imagine sharing a soundstage for weeks with a fellow actor, yet not daring to utter a single word to him. No friendly nods, no whispered apologies, just an impenetrable wall of silence. That's exactly what happened in 1972 on the set of Dr. Phibes Rises Again, when horror legend Vincent Price and up-and-coming star Robert Quarry found themselves locked in a feud so bitter it lasted 2 decades. One tried to break the ice with opera, the other answered with a cutting remark that froze Quarry in his tracks. What began as a petty clash over salaries and studio politics became Hollywood lore, a silent war fought in the corridors of a Gothic mansion built on Pinewood's backlit. On a soundstage dressed like a Rococo nightmare, with grand organ pipes, flickering gas lamps, and winding marble staircases, Vincent Price surveyed his domain. He was already Hollywood's premier horror villain, renowned for his velvet voice and sinister charm. A few paces away, Robert Quarry, cast as his supposed successor, paced anxiously. Quarry had earned respect in low-budget fright flicks under American International Pictures, AIP, but never had he felt the palpable chill emanating from Price when their paths crossed. As Quarry rehearsed lines, Price polished his prop organ keys, each lost in private thought and wary of the other's presence. In a well-intentioned attempt to bridge their divide, Quarry approached Price during a lull in filming. He recalled that Price admired opera and decided to serenade him with the opening bars of Che gelida menina from Puccini's La Boheme. The musical strains floated through the vaulted set. Quarry sang softly, hoping the gesture would melt the frost between them. Instead, Price's narrowed eyes locked onto Quarry's trembling form. Without so much as a courtesy nod, Price dismissed the aria with icy disdain. Production assistants on either side of the corridor held their breath, sensing the electric charge of Price's looming contempt. "Well, I always knew you weren't an actor," Price coldly retorted, his voice carrying across the soundstage like a guillotine's blade. That single barb cut deeper than any on-screen scare effect. Quarry's hopeful expression crumpled in shock. His opera flourish had been met not with praise or polite rebuke, but with a crushing insult that went straight for his professional dignity. Price returned to the organ, his gloved fingers tapping keys, as though he'd just crushed a cockroach underfoot. Quarry, drained of color, slipped back to his trailer, the echo of Price's words chasing him down every corridor. From that moment on, any scene requiring interaction between them had to be directed through intermediaries. Quarry waited by his trailer door for a runner to hand him his blocking note. "Stand stage left, deliver line." Across the soundstage, Price received parallel instructions. React to Quarry, then move down the corridor. They never rehearsed face-to-face. When Quarry finished a take, he handed off questions to an assistant, who tiptoed over to Price's corner and conveyed them in hushed tones. Price responded equally obliquely. Lines of dialogue traveled back and forth in whispered fragments, like Morse code sent through a web of reluctant messengers. Crew members joked that it was easier to sneak a cigarette break than to get these two men to trade more than 3 words. The roots of the conflict lay deeper than one ill-timed aria. Price, by then commanding roughly $75,000 per film, a princely sum for a B-movie studio, had grown increasingly at odds with AIP's tight-fisted budgets. Quarry, a leaner contract player, represented a cheaper alternative. Rumors swirled through studio corridors that AIP brass were grooming Quarry to assume Price's throne in their lucrative horror cycle. Price, fiercely protective of his hard-earned reputation, felt blindsided by whispers that he was being pushed aside in favor of a budget buy-in. Quarry, meanwhile, believed the stunning insult he'd endured was proof that Price resented his arrival rather than any professional threat. When production wrapped on Phibes Rises Again, the silent standoff carried over to their next joint assignment, Madhouse, shot in 1974. Storylines changed, titles were tossed aside, scripts arrived only days before shoot, and cheap stock footage from past Price vehicles padded out the runtime. Price, livid at the slapdash treatment and the sneaking suspicion that Madhouse had been engineered to highlight Quarry, refused to promote the film. He spent most days holed up in his trailer, clutching Goethe volumes and grumbling about artistic integrity. Quarry, stung by both the original opera rebuff and Price's growing aloofness, clawed at the sparse media interviews he could land, lamenting Hollywood's double standards without naming his former co-star. Their 20-year Cold War effectively ended only with Price's death in 1993. Quarry was nowhere to be seen at the memorial service, and neither man ever offered a public olive branch. No letters, no reconciliations, no whispered regrets in late-night confessions to mutual friends. Their feud became the stuff of whispered crew tales and the occasional footnote in Price biographies. Price, in later years, would recall the incident in clipped interviews as though it were an inconsequential ripple in the sea of his career, while Quarry, when pressed, would offer vague dismissals about professionalism and respect, steeling himself against any carpetbagging overtures from journalists seeking fresh gossip. In the decades following the opera debacle, both men's careers took divergent paths. Price cemented his status as a horror icon, narrating Tim Burton's Oscar-winning short Vincent in 1982, voicing Disney's flamboyant Rat King Professor Ratigan in The Great Mouse Detective in 1986, and delivering a haunting farewell in Edward Scissorhands in 1990. His last roles bore the weight of real tremors, a testament to his resilience in the face of early Parkinson's diagnosis. Quarry, meanwhile, carved out a niche in cult horror circles. Count Yorga, Vampire and its sequel, and a handful of exploitation features, but never again approached the A-list prominence Price enjoyed. Though the feud remained unfinished, both men left indelible marks on the genre. Price's legacy lives on in over 100 films, a world-class art collection, a namesake museum, and the echoes of his velvet narration in Michael Jackson's Thriller. Quarry's fiercest fangirl and fanboy circuits celebrate his lean intensity, the very traits that may have spurred Price's jealousy back in '72. Yet it's the silent war itself, ignited by an operatic overture and a single cutting line, that stands as Hollywood's cautionary tale. Respect is earned, status is fragile, and a moment's disdain can echo through the decades more loudly than any scream. In the end, Price's farewell was delivered not to Quarry, but to fans and art lovers who continue to resurrect his work, study his technique, and cherish his eclectic passions, from painting to politics to cooking. Quarry's service to cult horror endures in midnight movie rituals and dusty VHS collections. But it's the frozen aria, the fractured partnership, and the silent corridor of that Pinewood soundstage that capture the imagination. Two actors, bound by a shared project, torn apart by ego and circumstance, destined to pass words through bystanders rather than exchange them themselves. In the grand theater of Hollywood, sometimes the most dramatic acts unfold out of view, in the hushed exchanges that never occur and the grudges that never die.